I was at East High School. That was in 1928. And there were exactly 7 of us, little brown faces there. I was the only one in the sophomore class at that time. And I had come from Maury Junior High School, the top student. Well, at that time at East, there was only one thing we could do, go to class. Could not belong to clubs, could not do anything but go to class. And one day I was called from, I was in study hall. And when I got down to the office and she finally looked up and saw me, she wanted to know what she could do for me. And I told her, I said, well, I've been told you wanted to see me. And she asked me my name, and I told her, Marie Louise Anderson. And she said, well, we've been checking sophomores to see if they're taking the courses to go to college. And she looked through and there was my name, and they were, what she was calling in was the upper 10% of the class. My record was right there. She had never seen that it said Negro, which was what we were indicating. They would put race on, you know. And of course, since I was the only one, I guess it never dawned on her that there'd be a brown face coming in the 10%, upper 10% of the class. And I said, I do plan to go to college. See, my folks had told me that I was to get an education, so I wouldn't have to do that hard work that they were doing. That was all instilled in me, see. So that was the reason I kept my grades up. That's the reason I happened to wind up in the upper 10% of the class there. And she looked at me and she said, why? When I said I was going to college, why? And then I told her why, because that's what I'd been taught. And she had the nerve to tell me that I'd be wasting my father's money because all I could do would be to work in somebody's kitchen or clean somebody's house. At that time, I was trying to control my temper. Believe it or not, I had a temper, but it was one of these slow burn tempers, you know, and it was slowly burning up. And I would actually, this sounds, I don't know whether you have never done this, Don, but I could actually see red. And I could see it coming up. And I thought, oh, Marie, this isn't the time to blow. I just said, I'm going to college, and walked out. It hurt. I kept working hard. I wound up number 3 in 1931. When I graduated from high school, I wound up number 3 in a class of 357 and had a state scholarship. Those state scholarships were given in those days. We only had 5 high schools, and so the first 5 in the graduating class would be given a state scholarship to any state university or college. When I entered in 1931, it was Colorado Teachers College, CTC. Graduated in 1935. The Denver Public Schools had absolutely no African American teachers, period, and the community had been begging for them for years. It took 3 years to become a permanent teacher. That meant that I had to prove myself in 3 years before I'd get a permanent contract. And the reason it meant so much to me was I was the first black teacher hired directly on contract as a probationary. I had to keep that door open. I had to keep that job, and I did. When I received my permanent tenure in 38, they actually hired 2 more, and the door was open. I married in 1943. In 1945, I took maternity leave, and then I resigned from Whittier, from school. I stayed home for 8 years and had my family. And then I wanted to go back to teach. So I went back in 1953. Yeah, 1953. But I only went back as a substitute in my primary level so that I'd be free to be with my children when they needed me. 2 years later, when I walked in one day, the principal told me that the parents wanted to know why I didn't teach there. They didn't care what color I was, but the way I handled their children, they wanted me there. There was an opening. I was placed in there as a first grade teacher. A first grade that you couldn't blast me out of first grade. I loved it the whole time. It was really interesting because the head of the elementary education would call every week to see how Mrs. Greenwood was getting along. First time a brown teacher had ever been in a white school. And by the end of that year, in 1956, the Board of Education learned and saw that it takes all kinds of dedicated teachers. The board had said we would not adjust in a white school, that the teachers wouldn't accept us, and the parents would object. And look what happened when I was at Newland. The teachers just accepted me as a teacher. The parents even wanted me there. So that proved it. So in the fall of 1956, 2 other African American teachers were placed out in white schools, and they were just praised for their work. Yes, I had plenty of obstacles, but to me, maybe I just didn't realize they were obstacles. Sometimes it was just something you had to do and take care of and get there. Parents, as well as teachers, have to instill within these young people that no matter what, you get your education, you stay in school, you don't let the discrimination affect you. Remember, you're just as good as anybody else, you're as smart as anybody else, but nothing's free. You've got to work because you will get what you put into. To me, that is the basis. Never stop learning. You never will ever know everything. And the world does change, and you've got to keep going with it.